Let's make this one quick. I'm in the middle of watching One Piece. First things first, if you didn't last time, be sure to git add, git commit, and git push all of your stuff up to the repository that we made in the last lesson. We want to start on lesson 3, touch. Lesson 3, we'll call it variables.js. So there's a lot going on when it comes to variables, but because there's so much to it, making one video about all the variables, it would just be too long, and clearly you have too short of attention span for something like that. So I'm just going to talk about how to do declarations for variables and initializations for variables. So let's get started. First things first, you need to make a variable. Now there are 3 ways to make variables in JavaScript. There used to just be 1, but now there are 3 ever since ES6. So the first one that you may or may not already know is var, and then you can just give any arbitrary name. You can give it A, you can give it B, you can give it B, you can name it whatever. Generally speaking, when you're naming variables, you want to give it a name that is representative of what you're trying to do with the variable. If you're trying to use the variable to count something, maybe you'll call it count. If the variable is a number for something, maybe you'll call it number for thing. And ideally, you'll use camel case. So just remember, name doesn't matter when it comes to naming your variables. Other than that, you want the name to make sense. So there is var, there is let, and there is const. The difference between these 3 is not apparent, and honestly, to get in more depth about the difference between these 3 is beyond the scope of your current knowledge of JavaScript, assuming that this is your first time going through JavaScript. So for now, I want you guys to just be using let, because let acts like the old version of var. So whenever you declare a variable, I want you to go let. Now let's talk about initialization. So I've told you to use let. Let's use let to make a variable. Give it a name, we'll just say name, and we'll give it your name. So in my case, it would be Ryan. That's a declaration. All a declaration is, you make a variable, you set it equal to something. It can be a string, it can be an integer. We'll talk more about what those are later, but ideally, you want to set a variable when you make it so that it has a purpose. Now, you don't have to set a variable when you make it. Technically, it is perfectly valid to go let name, so you declared the variable, and then you can say name equals Ryan, in case you wanted to use it later. So that's it. Initialization is let name, and declaration is name equals to Ryan. Or you can do it all in one line, where it would then be name equals Ryan. So there you go, declaration and initialization. And one more thing, you can also declare multiple variables on the same statement. Now this isn't suggested, sometimes you'll get errors when you do this, but technically I could go name, number, language. These are all valid variables that I can now initialize later. So that's also valid to do. Oh, and since we're going over variables in general, I'm going to leave lesson 3 as a part 1, part 2, part 3 sort of thing. So don't worry about making any new files. We're going to do everything in lesson 3 right now. So I think that's all. Bye.